I was scared, but the Mafia boss had been extremely obsessed with me. The rain hammered against the penthouse windows as I pressed my back against the cold glass railing. Chicago's Navy Pier glittered below us, but all I could see was him. Ramirez stood inches away, his muscular arms caging me in on both sides. His white shirt hung open at the collar, revealing the dark tattoos that covered his chest and neck, roses, thorns, and words in Spanish I had memorized by now. His eyes burned into mine with an intensity that made my heart race. I was terrified, not because this dangerous man might hurt me. I was terrified because every part of me wanted to lean into him, to touch those tattooed arms, to surrender completely to what I felt. 6 months ago, I was just a graduate student studying art history. Now I stood in the home of a Mafia boss who had been watching me, protecting me, obsessing over me. The most frightening part, I was falling desperately in love with him, and there was no going back. But how did I get here? Can love really survive when it begins in fear and danger? Before we continue, tell us where you are watching from right now. Please hit that like button, share this story, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this one. Tomorrow we are dropping another story you will not want to miss. Your support means everything and helps us bring you more incredible stories. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. 3 months before that rainy night on the penthouse terrace, my life was beautifully ordinary. I was 24 years old, in my second year of graduate school at the University of Chicago, studying art history. Every morning, I would wake up in my tiny studio apartment in Wicker Park, make coffee in my second-hand French press, and watch the sun rise over the neighborhood's tree-lined streets. My apartment was small, but it was mine. One room with a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, a bathroom with vintage tiles that had seen better days, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. I had decorated it with prints of my favorite paintings and photographs I had taken around the city. It was not much, but after growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, having my own place in Chicago felt like freedom. My days followed a comfortable rhythm. I spent my mornings on campus, attending seminars in the art history department, losing myself in lectures about Renaissance painters and contemporary installation artists. My professors knew me by name. I was the student who always sat in the front row, who asked questions that went beyond the required reading, who genuinely loved the material. 3 afternoons a week, I worked at a small independent gallery in Lincoln Park. The gallery sat on Armitage Avenue, tucked between a vintage bookstore and an Italian cafe that made the best cappuccino I had ever tasted. The owner, Mrs. Delacroix, was an elderly French woman who had run the space for 30 years. She had soft white hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and an endless collection of stories about the art world in Paris during the 1960s. Mrs. Delacroix trusted me completely. She let me curate small exhibitions, work directly with artists, and handle the administrative side of running the gallery. It was the perfect internship for someone who dreamed of one day working at the Art Institute of Chicago. That was my goal, my North Star. I wanted to spend my career surrounded by beauty, helping people understand the power of art to transform the way we see the world. My social life was simple. I had a roommate named Claire who worked as a nurse at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. We would cook dinner together when our schedules aligned, watch movies on her laptop, and talk about our dreams for the future. She had recently started dating someone new, a guy named Tommy who worked in construction. I had only met him twice, briefly, when he picked her up from our apartment. He seemed nice enough, if a bit quiet and reserved. On weekends, I explored Chicago like it was an endless museum waiting to be discovered. I would take the train to different neighborhoods, camera in hand, photographing architecture and street scenes. The city fascinated me with its mix of old and new, beauty and grit, history and constant change. Sunday afternoons were sacred. I would visit the Garfield Park Conservatory on the west side, walking slowly through the palm house and the fern room, breathing in the humid air and the smell of earth and growing things. There was something peaceful about being surrounded by so much green life in the middle of an urban landscape. I would sit on the benches and sketch in my journal, or simply close my eyes and listen to the sound of water trickling in the fountains. Sometimes I went to the Art Institute, spending hours in the European galleries. There was one Monet painting in particular that I returned to again and again. It was a water lily scene, all blues and greens and reflected light. Standing in front of it made me feel calm, like the world slowed down and became softer around the edges. My life was not glamorous or exciting, but it was mine. I had plans and dreams and a clear path forward. I felt safe walking the streets of my neighborhood, taking the train late at night after closing the gallery, jogging along the lakefront path on Saturday mornings. Chicago was a big city, but I had learned its rhythms. I knew which streets to avoid after dark, which train cars to sit in, how to move through the world with basic caution but without fear. I had no idea that my ordinary life was about to shatter completely. I had no idea that someone had been watching me for weeks, learning my routine, memorizing my habits. I had no idea that danger was closer than I could have imagined, or that my life was about to collide with a world I did not know existed. Everything changed on a Tuesday evening in late spring when a man walked into the gallery just before closing time. It was 7:30 on a Tuesday evening, and the gallery was supposed to close at 7. Mrs. Delacroix had left an hour earlier to attend an auction downtown, trusting me to lock up and set the alarm. I was alone in the space, finishing the inventory of a new collection that had arrived that afternoon. Contemporary pieces, mostly abstract work with bold colors and emotional intensity. The gallery was quiet except for the soft jazz playing from the speaker system and the occasional sound of traffic passing on Armitage Avenue. I loved these moments alone with the art, when I could move slowly through the space and really look at each piece without interruption. The track lighting cast warm pools of illumination on the white walls, and the polished concrete floors reflected the glow. I was standing at the desk in the back, making notes in the inventory ledger, when I heard the bell above the front door chime. I looked up, ready to apologize and explain that we were closed, but the words died in my throat. The man who walked through the door was unlike anyone I had ever seen. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with a build that spoke of serious time spent training his body. His shoulders were broad beneath a charcoal suit that had clearly been tailored specifically for him. The fabric moved with him as he stepped inside, elegant but somehow dangerous at the same time. His hair was dark, almost black, styled back from his face but with a few strands falling across his forehead. His face was striking, all strong lines and sharp angles, with a jaw that looked carved from stone. But it was his eyes that held me frozen in place. They were dark, intense, and focused on me with an attention that felt physical, like I could feel the weight of his gaze on my skin. He moved through the gallery with a grace that seemed contradictory to his size. There was something controlled about the way he walked, purposeful, like a man who knew exactly where he was going and what he wanted. He did not look around nervously or hesitate. He simply moved deeper into the space, his hands in his pockets, his eyes scanning the paintings on the walls. As he turned slightly to examine a canvas, I noticed something that made my breath catch. Tattoos. They started at his wrists, dark lines and shapes that disappeared beneath the crisp white cuffs of his dress shirt. When he reached up to adjust his collar, I caught a glimpse of more ink traveling up his neck, partially hidden by the expensive fabric of his suit. I found my voice, though it came out less steady than I wanted. "We're about to close." He did not respond immediately. Instead, he continued walking slowly through the gallery, stopping in front of each painting for several seconds before moving to the next. His presence filled the entire space, making the gallery feel suddenly smaller, the air heavier. I felt my heart beating faster, though I could not have said whether it was from fear or something else entirely. Finally, he stopped in front of my favorite piece in the current collection. It was a portrait of a woman, her face half illuminated and half in shadow, as if she stood at the boundary between two different worlds. The artist had titled it Between Darkness and Light. I had spent nearly an hour earlier that day just staring at it, captivated by the emotion captured in the woman's expression. The man stood there for a long moment, studying the painting with genuine attention. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and rough, with the faintest trace of an accent I could not quite place. "Do you believe in fate, Miss Negrin?" The sound of my name coming from his lips sent a shock through my entire body. I took an instinctive step backward, my hip bumping against the desk. "How do you know my name?" He turned to face me fully, and the intensity in his eyes made it hard to breathe. Up close, I could see more details. A small scar above his left eyebrow, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the way the tattoos on his neck formed intricate patterns that disappeared beneath his collar, designs I could not quite make out but wanted to trace with my fingers. The thought came unbidden, and I pushed it away, confused by my own reaction to this stranger. "I make it my business to know things," he said, his gaze never leaving mine. "Especially about people who interest me." "I don't understand." My voice sounded small in the quiet gallery. "Who are you? What do you want?" He took a step toward me, just one, but it felt like the distance between us had collapsed entirely. I could smell his cologne now, something expensive and masculine with notes of cedar and spice. I gripped the edge of the desk behind me, needing something solid to hold on to. "My name is Ramirez Alvin." He said it simply, as if the name should mean something to me. When I continued to stare at him blankly, something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. "And I'm here because you're in danger, Joelle. You have been for the past 3 weeks." The way he said my first name, with that slight accent giving it a different texture, made my stomach flip. But his words were starting to penetrate through the fog of confusion and unexpected attraction. "Danger? What are you talking about?" "There are men watching you, following you, men who believe you are someone you're not, and who have plans for you that I cannot allow to happen." His jaw tightened, and I saw something fierce flash in his eyes. "I've been protecting you, but we need to talk. Now. And what I'm about to tell you is going to change everything." Ramirez walked to the front door of the gallery, locked it, and flipped the sign to closed. The click of the deadbolt echoed through the space. My rational mind told me I should be afraid, that I should demand he leave or threaten to call the police. But something in his manner, the careful way he moved, the genuine concern in his eyes, kept me rooted in place. He returned to where I stood, maintaining enough distance to not crowd me but close enough that I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his tattooed hands flexed at his sides. "Your roommate, Claire. Her boyfriend, Tommy." He said the names like facts he had memorized. "Tommy works for the Kozlov organization. Do you know what that means?" I shook my head, my mouth suddenly dry. "It means he's involved with people who traffic in weapons, drugs, and violence. The kind of people who have enemies, dangerous enemies." Ramirez's voice was steady but edged with something harder now. 3 weeks ago, Tommy made a mistake. He crossed the wrong people, took something that didn't belong to him. His rivals have been looking for ways to get to him, to hurt him where it counts. "What does this have to do with me?" I whispered, though part of me was beginning to understand, and the understanding filled me with cold dread. They've been watching Tommy. They saw him at your apartment multiple times. They saw a young woman leaving with him, getting into his car, kissing him goodbye. Ramirez's expression darkened. But they saw the wrong woman, Joelle. They saw you leaving the building one morning when Tommy was picking up Claire. They assumed you were his girlfriend. They've been following you ever since, learning your routine, waiting for the right moment to take you. The room felt like it was tilting. I gripped the desk harder, my knuckles turning white. No, that's not possible. I would have noticed someone following me. Would you? His voice was gentle now, almost sad. Think about it. The man reading a newspaper on the train platform when you wait for the red line. The jogger who always seems to be on the lakefront path when you run on Saturday mornings. The person sitting 3 tables away at the cafe near Harold Washington Library where you study. Each example hit me like a physical blow because I could remember those moments, those people who had seemed like normal parts of the city landscape. How many times had I seen the same faces without realizing it? How long had I been walking around completely unaware of the dangers surrounding me? Why are you telling me this? My voice cracked. Why do you care what happens to me? Ramirez was quiet for a moment, and something shifted in his expression. The hardness softened, replaced by something raw and vulnerable that seemed at odds with everything else about him. 3 months ago, I was at the Art Institute on business. I had a meeting nearby and I went in to kill some time. He spoke slowly, as if choosing each word carefully. I walked into the European galleries and I saw you standing in front of a Monet painting. Those water lilies. You were completely absorbed, like nothing else in the world existed except that canvas. You had this expression on your face, this pure joy, and I realized I hadn't seen anything that beautiful in years. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. You've been watching me for 3 months. Protecting you, he corrected, but there was no defense in his tone. When I learned about the threat against you 2 weeks later, when my sources told me that Kozlov's men had targeted the wrong woman, I couldn't walk away. I assigned my best people to keep you safe without you knowing. They've been keeping those men at bay, making sure you could live your life while we worked to resolve the situation. This is insane. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to process everything he was saying. You're telling me my life has been in danger for weeks and I had no idea. That you've had people following me, watching me, and I never noticed. I'm telling you that you're not safe anymore. His voice dropped lower, more urgent. The situation has escalated. Kozlov's men are planning something within the next few days. Being subtle isn't enough anymore. I need to move you somewhere secure, somewhere I can guarantee your safety until this is over. Move me where? My home. My penthouse in the Gold Coast. It's protected, secure. You'll be safe there. I stayed at him, this dangerous, beautiful stranger who claimed to have been watching me, protecting me, obsessing over me for months. Every instinct I had should have been screaming at me to refuse, to run. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw genuine fear. Not for himself, but for me. Part 4. The Impossible Decision, 700 to 900 words. I can't just leave my life and move in with a stranger. The words came out stronger than I felt. I have classes, work, responsibilities. I can't just disappear. Ramirez reached into his jacket and pulled out a phone. He showed me the screen. Photographs. Me leaving my apartment building. Me walking across campus. Me locking up the gallery. Me jogging along the lake. In each photo, there were circles drawn around figures in the background. The same faces appearing again and again. These were taken by my men over the past 2 weeks, documenting Kozlov's surveillance on you." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Do you see how close they've gotten? How vulnerable you are every single day?" I felt sick looking at those images. My safe, ordinary life suddenly looked different through this lens. Every mundane moment had been observed, recorded, analyzed by people who wanted to hurt me for something I had nothing to do with. "How long?" I asked quietly. "How long would I have to stay with you?" "I don't know. A few weeks, maybe longer. My people are working to resolve the situation, but I won't risk your safety by rushing." He put the phone away and looked at me with those intense dark eyes. "I know this is asking a lot. I know you have no reason to trust me. But Joelle, I will protect you with my life. That's a promise." The certainty in his voice, the fierce protectiveness, should have frightened me. Instead, it made something warm unfold in my chest. This man, this dangerous stranger, was willing to turn his entire life upside down to keep me safe. Why? Because he had seen me looking at a painting 3 months ago? Okay. The word escaped before I could overthink it. Okay, I'll come with you. 2 hours later, I sat in the back of a black luxury car as it glided through Chicago's nighttime streets. Ramirez had made calls, arranged for someone to pack my essential belongings from my apartment, contacted Mrs. Delacroix to explain I needed emergency time off. He handled everything with quiet efficiency, and I felt like I was watching my life happen to someone else. Claire had texted me 3 times. I had no idea what to tell her, so I simply said I was staying with a friend for a while and would explain later. The lie sat heavy in my stomach. The penthouse was on the 40th floor of a building in the Gold Coast neighborhood. When the elevator doors opened directly into the apartment, I stepped into a space that took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the entire living area, offering views of Lake Michigan stretching dark and endless to the east, and the glittering city sprawling in every other direction. The lights of Navy Pier twinkled in the distance. The interior was sophisticated but surprisingly comfortable. Leather furniture in deep charcoal tones, abstract art on the walls, shelves lined with books. It felt lived in, personal, not like some cold showpiece. "Your room is this way." Ramirez led me down a hallway to a spacious bedroom with its own bathroom and a view of the lake. My bags were already there, sitting on a chair by the window. "You have complete privacy. The door locks from the inside. You're safe here, Joelle. I promise you that." I turned to face him, and in the soft light of the bedroom, I could see more details of the tattoos that crept up his neck. There were words in Spanish, partially visible above his collar, and the edge of what looked like a rose with thorns winding around his throat. "Why are you really doing this?" I asked, needing to understand. "The truth, Ramirez. Not just because you saw me at a museum 3 months ago." He was quiet for a long moment, and I watched emotions play across his face. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with honesty. "Because when I saw you that day, standing in front of that painting with wonder on your face, you reminded me that beauty still exists in this world. My life is filled with violence and darkness and difficult choices. I've done things I'm not proud of. I've become someone I never wanted to be." He took a step closer, and my breath caught. "But you looked at that art like it held magic, and for just a moment, I remembered what it felt like to believe in something good. I couldn't let anything happen to you. I couldn't let them destroy that light." My heart hammered against my ribs. "You don't even know me. I know you love art more than anything. I know you visit the conservatory every Sunday because you need beauty to breathe. I know you're kind to the elderly woman who runs the gallery, patient with the artists, generous with your time." His eyes held mine, intense and vulnerable. "I know enough to know that you're worth protecting. even if you never forgive me for turning your life upside down. Standing there in that beautiful room, looking at this dangerous man who spoke about me like I was something precious, I realized the most terrifying truth of all. I was attracted to him. Despite everything, despite the fear and the confusion and the absolute insanity of this situation, I wanted to close the distance between us. I wanted to touch those tattoos, to understand the story they told. I wanted to know everything about this man who had been watching me, protecting me, obsessing over me. Could I trust him? I had no idea. But as I looked into his eyes, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. My life would never be ordinary again. The first morning in Ramirez's penthouse, I woke to sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows and the distant sound of waves against the shore of Lake Michigan. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The bed was impossibly comfortable, the sheets softer than anything I had ever felt. When memory returned, bringing with it the surreal events of the previous night, I sat up and looked around the unfamiliar room. Someone had knocked softly on my door. When I opened it, there was a tray with fresh coffee, fruit, and pastries from what I would later learn was Ramirez's favorite French bakery. A note in elegant handwriting said simply, "Take your time. I'm in the study when you're ready." I found him an hour later, showered and dressed in jeans and a sweater from my hastily packed bags. The study was a revelation. An entire room lined floor to ceiling with bookshelves, filled with volumes in multiple languages. Literature, history, philosophy, art books. A large desk sat near the window, and Ramirez stood there, dressed casually in dark pants and a fitted black shirt that showed the lines of his muscular frame. He was looking at something on his laptop, his brow furrowed in concentration. When he noticed me in the doorway, his expression softened immediately. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected to." I stepped into the room, drawn to the books like a magnet. "I didn't know you were a reader." "There's a lot you don't know about me." He closed the laptop and watched as I explored the shelves. "But I hope you'll learn." Over the following days, a routine emerged. Ramirez would leave early in the mornings for what he vaguely referred to as business. I spent my time reading from his extensive collection, working on assignments for my graduate classes that I submitted online, and staring out at the incredible views. He always returned by early evening, and we would eat dinner together on the terrace when the weather was warm, or in the dining room when it rained. Those dinners became the foundation of something unexpected. Ramirez asked me questions about my life with genuine interest. He wanted to know about my childhood in Pennsylvania, about the small town where I grew up and why I had chosen art history as my passion. He listened intently as I talked about my parents, both teachers who had encouraged my love of beauty and creativity, and about the first time I had visited a real art museum and felt my entire world expand. "What made you choose Chicago?" he asked one evening as we sat on the terrace, the city lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. "The Art Institute," I said simply. I visited during my undergraduate years and knew this was where I needed to be. The collection is extraordinary, and the graduate program was everything I wanted. I looked at him, curious. "What about you? Why Chicago?" His expression grew more guarded. "Business opportunities. Connections. Chicago has always been a city where power shifts and changes, where someone smart enough can build something substantial." It was a careful answer, revealing nothing of his actual work. But I was learning to read the subtle shifts in his expression, the way his jaw tightened when his world intruded on our conversations. One evening, about a week into my stay, I discovered him in the study sketching. I had come looking for a book and found him bent over his desk, pencil moving across paper with confident strokes. When he noticed me, he started to close the notebook, but I moved quickly to his side. Let me see. Reluctantly, he turned the notebook toward me. The page was covered with architectural drawings. A building, modern but with classical influences, all clean lines and interesting angles. It was beautiful and surprisingly delicate for someone with such large, scarred hands. "You're talented," I said softly, studying the details. "Really talented. It's just something I do sometimes. A hobby from another life." He set the pencil down, his tattooed fingers spreading across the page. "I wanted to be an architect once, before everything else got decided for me. It's not too late." He laughed, but there was sadness in it. "Some doors close, Joelle. Once you walk through certain others, there's no going back." I wanted to argue, but I could see the pain in his eyes, the weight of choices made and paths taken that couldn't be undone. Instead, I asked him to show me more of his sketches. We spent the next 2 hours going through his notebooks, and I saw a different side of him. A man who dreamed of creating beautiful spaces, who understood proportion and light, who had once imagined a very different future. 3 nights later, he presented me with a gift. A vintage Leica camera, the kind serious photographers used, beautiful and clearly expensive. "I noticed you don't have your camera with you," he said as I stared at the box in shock. "You told me once that you love photography, that you explored the city through your lens. I thought maybe you'd want to photograph Chicago from up here. The views are different from 40 floors up." I looked up at him, this dangerous man offering me tools to see beauty. "Ramirez, this is too much. I can't accept something like this." "Yes, you can." He stepped closer, and I caught that scent of cedar and spice that I was beginning to associate with safety. "You're here because of me, because my world crashed into yours. Let me give you something that brings you joy while you're waiting for your life to return to normal." But I was starting to realize that normal felt like a distant memory, something that belonged to a different person. The woman I had been 3 weeks ago would never have accepted such an extravagant gift from a man she barely knew. But that woman had also never stood on a penthouse terrace at sunset watching Ramirez point out different neighborhoods while he told stories about the city's architecture and history. There were moments when his other life intruded. Phone calls he would take in another room, speaking in rapid Spanish with an edge to his voice I never heard when he talked to me. Nights when he came home late with tension radiating from his shoulders, and I would find him on the terrace staring at the city with an expression that made my chest ache. Once, I woke at 3 in the morning and found him sitting in the dark living room, a glass of whiskey untouched on the table beside him. When I asked if he was all right, he just looked at me for a long moment before saying, "I am now." I was beginning to understand that whatever he did in his world, it cost him something. And somehow, my presence in his home brought him peace he couldn't find anywhere else. 2 weeks into living with Ramirez, I finally asked the question that had been building inside me since that first night. We were on the terrace after dinner, the June air warm and humid, the sound of the city a distant hum below us. He stood at the railing, looking out at the lake, and I watched the way the light caught the tattoos on his forearms where he had rolled up his sleeves. "Tell me about them," I said quietly. "Your tattoos, they are not just decoration, are they? They mean something." He turned to look at me, and I saw him weighing the question, deciding how much truth to share. Finally, he held out his right arm, the intricate designs visible in the terrace lighting. "Come here." I moved to stand beside him, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. He laid his arm on the railing between us, palm up, and I looked down at the artwork that covered his skin. A phoenix rising from flames stretched from his wrist halfway to his elbow, the detail so fine I could see individual feathers. "This was my first," he said, his voice low. "I got it when I was 18, after my father died. He was killed in a deal that went wrong, and I was suddenly in charge of everything he had built. I felt like I was burning alive, like the life I had wanted was turning to ash. But I also knew I had to rise from those ashes, had to become someone stronger than I was. His finger traced the outline of the phoenix. It reminded me every day that I could choose to be more than just a product of violence, that I could transform. On his left forearm, roses intertwined with thorns wrapped around his arm in a spiral pattern. The roses were beautiful, rendered in shades of black and gray that somehow suggested deep red. But the thorns were sharp, dangerous, drawn with vicious points that looked like they could cut. "Beauty and pain," I said softly, my fingers hovering just above his skin, not quite touching. "They grow together. Everything beautiful in life comes with the possibility of pain," he agreed. "The roses represent the things worth protecting, worth fighting for. The thorns are the cost of that protection, the violence necessary to keep beauty alive in a violent world." I looked up at him. "And on your neck? I've seen words, but I can't read them." He hesitated, vulnerability crossing his face. Then he tilted his head, exposing the side of his neck where Spanish words wound up toward his jaw. "Lealtad hasta la muerte," loyalty until death. And on the other side, redemption is possible. Redemption is possible. "Do you believe that?" I asked. "That redemption is possible for you?" "I want to." His dark eyes met mine, and I saw depths of pain there that took my breath away. "I've spent 15 years trying to be better than my father, trying to bring some kind of honor to work that has no honor. I don't traffic in certain things. I don't hurt innocents. I protect the neighborhoods under my control, make sure families are safe, that children can walk to school without fear." He turned to face me fully now, and in the soft light I could see the scars that intersected with his tattoos. A long thin line across his collarbone. Small circular marks on his shoulder that looked like old bullet wounds. "I'm not a good man, Joelle. I've done things that would horrify you. I've made choices that keep me awake at night. But I'm trying to be better than the alternative, better than the men who would take my place if I weren't there." "Tell me about Miami," I said gently. "About who you were before all of this." He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of old grief. "I grew up in a world where violence was normal. My father ran his organization with brutality and fear. He believed the only way to maintain power was through intimidation, through making examples of anyone who crossed him." Ramirez's hands gripped the railing, his knuckles white. "From the time I was 10 years old, he was grooming me to take over, teaching me that compassion was weakness, that mercy would get me killed." "But you didn't believe him." "I tried not to. My mother died when I was 8, and the only other person who showed me love was my grandmother. She would tell me stories about my grandfather, who had been an architect in Cuba before they fled to America. She said I had his hands, his eye for beauty, his soul that wanted to create rather than destroy." His voice softened with the memory. "She's the one who encouraged me to sketch, who told me I could be anything I wanted to be." "What happened to her?" "She passed away when I was 17. Heart attack. She never knew that a year later I would become exactly what she had hoped I wouldn't." He looked at me, and I saw the shame there. "I've tried to honor her memory by being different than my father, by using my power to protect rather than just destroy. But I don't know if that's enough to balance the scales." I reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and placed my hand over his on the railing. His skin was warm, the texture rough from old calluses and scars. He stayed at where we touched like it was something miraculous. 3 weeks ago, I followed you," he admitted quietly. You went to Lurie Children's Hospital. I needed to understand why, so I made inquiries. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph. Ramirez sitting in a hospital room, reading to a small girl with no hair, clearly undergoing cancer treatment. The expression on his face in that photo was so tender it made my throat tight. I go every week. Different hospitals, different children. I read to them, talked to them, tried to make them smile. He put the phone away, not meeting my eyes. I also fund scholarships for kids from neighborhoods like the one I grew up in. Kids who want to be architects or artists or teachers. I do it anonymously because in my world, kindness is seen as weakness. Who knows about this? Only my most trusted people. If my enemies knew, they would target those children to hurt me. If rivals knew, they would see it as proof that I'm soft, vulnerable. He finally looked at me again. You're the first person outside my organization that I've told. I understood then what he was really saying. He was trusting me with information that could be used against him, with knowledge of what he truly cared about. It was an act of faith from a man who probably hadn't had faith in anyone for a very long time. Without thinking, I reached up and traced the phoenix on his forearm with my fingertips. He inhaled sharply at the touch, his muscles tensing beneath my hand. I moved to the roses and thorns, feeling the warmth of his skin, the slight rays where ink met flesh. Then I traced up his arm to his shoulder, to his neck, following the Spanish words I now understood. You're not a monster, I whispered. You're a man trying to survive in a monstrous world. And you're doing it while protecting people who can't protect themselves. That means something, Ramirez. His hand came up to cover mine where it rested against his neck. You see me too clearly. It's dangerous. Why is it dangerous? Because it makes me want things I have no right to want. 3 weeks after I moved into the penthouse, Ramirez came home early. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I was curled up in his study reading a book about Italian Renaissance art. When I heard the elevator doors open, I looked up in surprise. He never came home before 6. He stood in the doorway of the study, still in his suit, and the expression on his face made my stomach drop. Something had changed. It's over, he said simply. The situation with Kozlov. My people reached an agreement. Tommy has been dealt with, the misunderstanding about your identity has been cleared up, and there's no longer a threat against you. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt something cold settle in my chest. So I can go home. Yes. He loosened his tie, a gesture I had come to recognize as him dealing with tension. You're free to return to your life, your apartment, your work at the gallery, your classes. Everything can go back to normal. Normal. The word felt strange, almost meaningless. I set the book down carefully, my hands trembling slightly. When? Whenever you want. Tonight. Tomorrow. Next week. There's no rush. He walked to the window, his back to me. I'll arrange for security to check on you periodically, just to be certain. But the danger is gone, Joelle. You're safe now. I stood up, my heart pounding. And what about us? He turned to face me, and I saw something broken in his eyes. There is no us. There was a situation, and I protected you, and now it's resolved. You can have your life back. What if I don't want it back? The words came out before I could stop them, raw and honest. He stared at me like I had struck him. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. I moved closer to him, this man who had somehow become the center of my world in just 3 weeks. Do you think I can just go back to my tiny apartment and pretend none of this happened? Pretend I don't know you? Pretend I don't care about you? You shouldn't care about me. His voice was rough with emotion. Joelle, I'm not good for you. My world is violent and dangerous. You deserve someone who can give you a normal life, someone who doesn't have blood on his hands. Stop telling me what I deserve. I was close enough now to see the muscle working in his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. I'm 24 years old and capable of making my own choices. And I'm choosing to stay. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. For the first time in my life, I know exactly what I'm saying. My voice softened. These past 3 weeks, getting to know you, seeing who you really are behind everything else. Ramirez, you've shown me a different side of this city, a different side of myself. You've made me feel seen in a way no one ever has. How am I supposed to walk away from that? He reached for me, his tattooed hands framing my face with unexpected gentleness. I'm obsessed with you. Do you understand that? I think about you constantly. I rearrange my entire day just to have dinner with you. I come home early because I can't stand being away from you. That's not healthy, Joelle. That's not normal. I don't want normal. I placed my hands over his, feeling the warmth of his skin, the slight tremor in his fingers. I want you. You're going to regret this. Maybe. But I'd regret walking away more. He kissed my forehead, a gesture so tender it made my eyes burn with tears. Let's go for a walk. You've been cooped up in here for weeks. Let me show you the city. An hour later, we walked along the Chicago Riverwalk as the sun began to set. The river reflected the golden light, and the sounds of the city surrounded us. People strolled past, couples holding hands, tourists taking photographs. Near the Michigan Avenue Bridge, a trio of jazz musicians had set up, playing a slow, soulful melody that drifted over the water. We stopped to listen, standing close but not touching. The music was beautiful, full of longing and hope mixed together. When the song ended and a new one began, something even slower and more romantic, Ramirez turned to me. Joelle, I need you to understand what you're choosing. My life will never be simple. There will be dangers I can't always predict. There will be nights when I come home and can't tell you where I've been. There will be moments when you'll be afraid. I'm already afraid. I looked up at him, at this beautiful, dangerous man who had turned my world completely upside down. I've been terrified since the moment you walked into that gallery. But not of you hurting me. I'm afraid of how much I want this, how much I want you, despite every logical reason I shouldn't. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. You should run from me. I don't want to run. I want to stay. I want to know everything about you. I want more late-night conversations on the terrace. I want to see more of your sketches. I want to hear about your day and tell you about mine. I want to fall asleep knowing you're in the next room and wake up to coffee you had someone deliver from that bakery you love. I took a breath, my heart racing. I want you, Ramirez, all of you, the dangerous parts and the tender parts and everything in between. His control cracked. I saw it happen. So the moment he stopped fighting what we both felt, his hand slid into my hair, tilting my face up to his, and his eyes searched mine one last time, giving me a chance to change my mind. I didn't take it. When his lips met mine, the entire city seemed to fall away. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, as if he still couldn't quite believe I was choosing this. But when I pressed closer, my hand sliding up his chest to wrap around his neck, he deepened the kiss with a hunger that made my knees weak. He kissed me like I was air and he had been drowning, like I was the answer to questions he hadn't known how to ask. His arms wrapped around me, pulling me against him, and I felt the solid strength of his body, the rapid beating of his heart against my chest. When we finally pulled apart, Both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. The jazz music still played behind us, and the city moved around us, but we stood in our own private world. "I love you," he said, the words rough and new, like he had never said them before to anyone. "God help me, I love you so much it terrifies me." "I love you too." The admission felt right, felt true, felt like the most honest thing I had ever said. He kissed me again, softer this time, sweeter. When he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes that he didn't try to hide. "You're going to change everything," he whispered. "Good," I replied, reaching up to trace the tattoos on his neck, the words about redemption that I now understood. "Maybe we can change each other." We stood there as the sun set completely, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, the river reflecting all that color. The jazz musicians played on, and somewhere in the crowd that had gathered to listen, people applauded. I didn't know if they were applauding the music or the couple kissing by the water, and I didn't care. All I knew was that I had made my choice. I was staying. I was choosing love over safety, passion over comfort, this complicated, dangerous, beautiful man over the simple life I had planned. And as Ramirez held me close, his lips brushing my temple, I knew he had made his choice too. Whatever came next, we would face it together. We walked back to the penthouse hand in hand, and everything felt different. The air seemed charged with possibility, with the weight of what we had just confessed to each other. In the elevator, Ramirez pulled me close, kissing me again with a tenderness that made my heart ache. When we reached the apartment, he led me to the terrace. The city sparkled below us, millions of lights creating a constellation on earth. We stood at the railing, his arms wrapped around me from behind, and he spoke quietly against my hair. "I need to tell you the whole truth, about how long I've been watching you, how deep this obsession goes." His voice was raw with vulnerability. That day at the Art Institute, 3 months ago, I had finished a meeting nearby, a negotiation that had gone badly. I was angry, tense, ready to make decisions I would probably regret. I walked into the museum to clear my head. I leaned back against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. I found myself in the European galleries, and there you were, standing in front of those water lilies, completely absorbed. You had this expression on your face like the painting was showing you something sacred. And I just stopped. Everything in me went quiet for the first time in years. His arms tightened around me. I stood there watching you for 20 minutes. The way you tilted your head to see the brush strokes from different angles. The small smile that played at your lips. The way you seemed completely unaware of anyone else in the room. "You really were stalking me," I said softly, but there was no accusation in it. "Yes." I left the museum and told myself to forget about you. But the next day, I found myself driving past the gallery where you worked. I saw you through the window, talking to an elderly woman, and your whole face was animated with passion as you gestured at a painting. I made inquiries, found out your name, where you lived, what you studied. He turned me in his arms, so I was facing him. The city lights reflected in his dark eyes. I told myself I was just curious, that it was harmless. But Joelle, I memorized your schedule. I knew you took the red line at 7:30 every morning. I knew you stopped at that cafe on Clark Street for coffee with cream and 2 sugars. I knew you jogged along the lakefront on Saturday mornings and visited the conservatory on Sundays. When I learned about the threat against you, it gave me an excuse to act on this obsession. But the truth is, I would have found a way into your life eventually. I couldn't stay away. "That should scare me," I whispered, reaching up to cup his face in my hands. "But it doesn't. It makes me feel cherished. Like I matter more than anything else in your world." You do. You're the only thing that matters anymore. He kissed my palm, then my wrist, his lips warm against my skin. I've tried to keep some distance, to be honorable. But I can't stop thinking about you. About making you smile. About keeping you safe. About building a life with you even though I have no right to ask for that. You have every right, I said fiercely. Because I want the same things. I want to build a life with you, Ramirez. Whatever that looks like. The months that followed were unlike anything I could have imagined. Loving Ramirez meant accepting the complications of his world. There were nights when danger required us to move between his properties. We spent a week at his estate in Lake Forest, a beautiful home surrounded by trees and privacy. Another time, we stayed in a secure apartment in River North while his people handled a situation he wouldn't explain in detail. I learned to read the signs of when his work had been particularly difficult. He would come home late, tension radiating from every line of his body, and I would find him on whatever terrace or balcony was available, staring at the city. I learned that on those nights, he didn't need me to ask questions. He just needed me to be there, to remind him that something good existed in his world. But there were also moments of pure magic that made every complication worth it. One night, he surprised me by arranging for us to have the observation deck of the John Hancock Center completely to ourselves at midnight. We stood at the top of the city, looking down at Chicago spread out beneath us like a blanket of lights, and he pulled me into his arms. "Dance with me," he said softly. There was no music except what drifted up from the city below, faint and distant. But we swayed together anyway, his cheek against my hair, my head on his chest. He hummed something low and melodic, and I felt tears prick my eyes at the intimacy of the moment. This powerful, dangerous man holding me gently while the city watched from below. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" "For letting me see this side of you. For trusting me with who you really are." His arms tightened around me. "You're the only person who's ever seen all of me. The only person I've ever wanted to." He surprised me again a few weeks later with a weekend escape to Galena, a charming historic town in northwestern Illinois. We stayed at a bed and breakfast, and for 2 days, we pretended to be a normal couple. We explored antique shops and art galleries. We hiked trails along the bluffs overlooking the Mississippi River. We had dinner at a small restaurant where nobody knew who Ramirez was or cared about anything except whether we wanted dessert. "This is what life could be like," I said as we walked through the town square, our hands clasped together. "If you ever wanted to walk away from everything else." He stopped walking, pulling me to face him. "Would you want that? A quiet life in a small town, away from Chicago?" I thought about it honestly. I don't know. I love the city. I love my work. But I love you more. If leaving was what you needed to be happy, to be safe, I would go anywhere with you. He kissed me there on the street, not caring who saw. "I don't deserve you." "Stop saying that. You deserve happiness just as much as anyone else." When we returned to Chicago, Ramirez did something that showed me just how much he believed in my dreams. He used his connections to arrange an internship for me at the Museum of Contemporary Art. It was a position that would normally take years of networking and experience to obtain, but somehow he made it happen. "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" he asked when he told me. "Your goal was always to work at a major museum." "The Art Institute was my dream," I admitted. "But this is incredible. How did you do this?" "I know people. I made calls. I may have made a substantial donation to the acquisition fund." He smiled at my expression. "I want you to have everything you've dreamed of, Joelle. Your career, your passion, your purpose. Being with me shouldn't mean sacrificing who you are or what you want. I threw my arms around his neck, overwhelmed by his generosity. I love you. So much. I love you too. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. As the months passed, I realized that what we had built together was more than just romance. It was partnership. It was two people from completely different worlds choosing each other despite every obstacle. It was complicated and sometimes scary and absolutely worth every moment of uncertainty. 1 year after that kiss on the Riverwalk, my life had transformed in ways I never could have predicted. I stood in a gallery space at the Museum of Contemporary Art, watching visitors move through an exhibition I had helped curate. The satisfaction of seeing my work come to life never got old. But what made this moment perfect was knowing that Ramirez was standing in the back of the room, watching me with pride in his eyes. He came to every exhibition opening, every presentation, every milestone in my career. He would arrive with 2 of his men, always dressed impeccably in dark suits, and position himself where he could see the entire room. Most people probably thought he was additional security, but I knew the truth. He was there because he wanted to witness every success, every achievement, every moment of joy in my life. After the guests had gone and I was packing up my materials, he would come to me, pull me close, and ask me to tell him everything. Who had interesting questions? Which pieces resonated most with visitors? What I was proud of and what I would do differently next time. He listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that showed he understood not just the surface of my work but its deeper meaning. Living with Ramirez had taught me things about him that constantly surprised me. I discovered the full extent of his generosity to struggling families in neighborhoods throughout Chicago. He paid rent for single mothers who were falling behind. He covered medical bills for people who couldn't afford treatment. He made sure elderly residents had heat in the winter and air conditioning in the summer. Why do you hide this? I asked him one evening after I had accidentally seen records of his charitable payments. People should know about the good you do. He looked at me with those intense dark eyes. Because in my world, kindness is seen as weakness. The moment people think you have a soft heart, they try to exploit it. The moment they know what you care about, they target it to hurt you. You mean they would target the people you help? Or me? His expression hardened. Yes. Which is why you can never tell anyone about this. Joelle. Promise me. I promised, understanding the impossible position he was in. He wanted to do good, to use his power and resources to help people, but he had to do it in secret to protect both himself and those he helped. His protectiveness of me had only intensified over the year. Once, I mentioned casually that a man at a coffee shop had made me uncomfortable with his persistent attempts at conversation. That evening, Ramirez sat me down with a serious expression. Tell me exactly what happened. Every detail. It was nothing, really. Just some guy who couldn't take a hint. Joelle. His voice was firm. I need to know about every situation that makes you uncomfortable, everyone who approaches you in ways that feel wrong. I need to know so I can keep you safe. I had learned that this was how he showed love. Through vigilance, through protection, through making sure that nothing and no one could harm me. It should have felt suffocating, but instead, it made me feel cherished in a way I had never experienced. We had found a balance between his darkness and my light. I brought softness into his world. I reminded him that beauty existed, that hope was possible, that there were things worth protecting beyond just territory and power. He would come home from difficult days, and I would be there with dinner on the terrace, music playing softly, and my presence alone would ease the tension from his shoulders. But he had changed me too. I was no longer the naive graduate student who thought the world was simple, that people could be easily categorized as good or bad. I understood now that life was more complex, that sometimes good people had to make terrible choices, that strength came in many forms. I had become braver, more confident, more willing to stand up for what I believed in. "You've made me softer," he told me one night as we lay in bed, the city lights filtering through the windows. His tattooed hand traced patterns on my shoulder. "Before you, I was so hard, so closed off. I didn't let myself feel things because feeling meant vulnerability. But you've broken down those walls, made me remember what it's like to be human." "And you've made me stronger," I replied, turning to face him. "You've taught me that being gentle doesn't mean being weak, that I can be soft and still be powerful, that I can believe in beauty and still understand the harsh realities of the world." He kissed me softly, his hand cupping my face with that gentleness that always surprised me coming from such a dangerous man. "We've changed each other." "For the better," I agreed. Living with Ramirez meant accepting that there were parts of his life I would never fully know, questions I couldn't ask, nights when he came home with blood on his knuckles that he would wash off before touching me. But it also meant waking up every morning to find him watching me with wonder in his eyes, as if he still couldn't quite believe I was real. It meant being loved with an intensity that most people never experience in their entire lives. Every day, he chose me. Above everything else in his complicated, dangerous world, he chose me. And I chose him right back, with full knowledge of who he was and what his life entailed. That choice, made every single day, was what made our love real. On a cool evening in October, Ramirez told me he wanted to take me somewhere special. He was secretive about the destination, but there was something different in his manner. A nervousness I had never seen before, an energy that made my heart beat faster with anticipation. When the car pulled up in front of the gallery on Armitage Avenue in Lincoln Park, I looked at him in surprise. "The gallery? There's something I need to show you," he said simply, helping me out of the car. Mrs. Delacroix had sold the gallery 6 months earlier, but the new owner had maintained its character and charm. The space looked much the same as it had that Tuesday evening when Ramirez had walked through the door and changed my life forever. The same warm lighting, the same polished floors, even some of the same artwork on the walls. We were alone. He must have arranged for privacy, because the gallery was closed and empty except for us. He led me slowly through the space, his hand warm in mine, until we stood in front of that same painting. The woman caught between darkness and light, her face half illuminated and half in shadow, forever suspended at the boundary between two worlds. "Do you remember what I asked you the first time we stood here?" His voice was quiet, intimate. "You asked if I believed in fate. And now, after everything that's happened, everything we've been through together, do you believe in it?" I looked at the painting, then at him. "Yes, I believe we were meant to find each other, no matter how impossible the circumstances." He turned to face me fully, taking both of my hands in his. I could feel the slight tremor in his fingers, see the vulnerability in his dark eyes. "I need to tell you something I haven't fully admitted before. That day when I walked into this gallery, I told you I was here to warn you about the danger. But that wasn't the whole truth." He took a breath, and I saw him gathering courage. "I had been watching you for weeks by that point. Not just 3 months, but actively watching, learning everything about you. I knew you closed the gallery alone on Tuesday evenings. I knew Mrs. Delacroix would be at an auction. I planned to come here that night, to find a reason to talk to you." My heart pounded, but I didn't pull away. "You manufactured our meeting. The danger was real, but I would have found a way to you regardless. I was obsessed. Joelle, I memorized your schedule down to the minute. I knew you stopped at the cafe at Clark and Diversey every morning at 7:45. I knew you jogged exactly 3 miles along the lakefront, always starting at Oak Street Beach. I knew you visited the conservatory at 2 o'clock on Sunday afternoons and stayed for exactly 90 minutes. He brought my hands to his lips, kissing my knuckles gently. I know how that sounds. I know it should terrify you, but I need you to understand the depth of what I feel. From that first moment I saw you at the Art Institute, you became the center of my world. Everything else revolved around you. Every decision I made, I thought about how it would affect you, how it would keep you safe, how it might bring me closer to you. Tears pricked my eyes, but they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of being seen, being chosen, being loved with such overwhelming completeness. He released one of my hands and reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. When he opened it, I gasped. Inside was a vintage ring, a deep blue sapphire surrounded by delicate diamonds, set in what looked like platinum or white gold. It was elegant, timeless, absolutely beautiful. This was my grandmother's, he said softly. The only person in my family who ever showed me unconditional love. She always told me that someday I would meet someone who would see past everything else to the man I could be. Someone who would love me not despite who I am, but because of it. He lowered himself to one knee, and my breath caught in my throat. We were standing in the exact spot where we had first met, where my ordinary life had collided with his extraordinary one, where everything had begun. I have no right to ask this. I'm offering you a life that will never be simple, a future that comes with complications and dangers most people never face. But Joelle Negrin, I am hopelessly, completely, desperately obsessed with you. You are the reason I breathe, the reason I fight, the reason I want to be better than I am. His voice cracked with emotion. Will you marry me? Will you spend your life with a man who will love you with everything he has, who will protect you with his last breath, who will choose you above everything else in this world? I was crying freely now, tears streaming down my face as I looked at this powerful, dangerous, beautiful man kneeling before me with his heart laid bare. Yes, I said through my tears. Yes, Ramirez. 1,000 times yes. He stood, sliding the ring onto my finger with hands that shook slightly. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for me. When he pulled me into his arms and kissed me, I tasted salt from both our tears. We stood there in that gallery, holding each other as if we could stop time, as if we could exist forever in this perfect moment. I love you, he whispered against my lips, more than I ever thought I was capable of loving anyone. I love you too, with everything I am. We chose to marry on a private beach in the Indiana Dunes, just across the state line from Chicago. It was a place where Lake Michigan stretched endless and blue, where sand dunes rose like gentle mountains, where the sound of waves provided natural music. The location was remote enough to ensure privacy and security, but close enough to the city we both loved. The wedding was small, intimate, exactly what we both wanted. Only the people who truly mattered, the ones who had supported us through the impossible journey of our relationship. Ramirez's most trusted men stood on his side, men who had become something like family to me over the past year. They had protected me, respected me, and welcomed me into their complicated world with surprising warmth. My closest friends were there, including Claire, who had finally understood why I had disappeared so suddenly from our shared apartment. She stood beside me as my maid of honor, tears already forming in her eyes before the ceremony even began. But perhaps the most meaningful guest was Mrs. Delacroix. She had come out of retirement, traveling from her new home in Wisconsin to witness our union. When she saw me in my simple ivory dress, she took my hands and smiled with knowing eyes. I knew the moment he walked into my gallery that night, she said softly. I knew he was coming for you, and I knew you would choose him, even though it frightened you. Love always requires courage, my dear. The ceremony was set for sunset. We stood barefoot on the sand, the lake wind catching my dress and Ramirez's hair. He wore a dark suit without a tie, the top buttons of his white shirt open, showing the tattoos at his collarbone. He looked relaxed, happy, more at peace than I had ever seen him. As the officiant spoke, the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson and deep purple. The water reflected all that color, turning the entire world into something magical. When it came time for our vows, Ramirez took my hands and spoke first. His voice was steady but full of emotion. Joelle, a year ago you were standing in a gallery, completely unaware that your life was about to change. I walked in that night knowing I was crossing a line, knowing I was bringing my dangerous world into contact with your light. I was terrified of what might happen, but I couldn't stay away. He paused, his thumbs stroking the backs of my hands. You have transformed me. You've made me remember what it means to hope, to dream, to believe that I can be more than what I was raised to be. You've taught me that strength and gentleness can exist together, that power means nothing without purpose, and that the greatest risk I could ever take was opening my heart to love. Tears streamed down my face as he continued. I promise to protect you with everything I have. I promise to choose you above all else. I promise to be worthy of the gift you've given me by loving someone like me. And I promise that every single day, I will work to be the man you see when you look at me with those trusting eyes. When it was my turn, I had to take a breath to steady my voice. Ramirez, when you walked into that gallery, I was terrified, not just of you, but of what I felt the moment our eyes met. I knew instinctively that you would change everything, that nothing would ever be the same. And I was right. I smiled through my tears. You've shown me that love isn't always safe or simple, that sometimes the most beautiful things in life come wrapped in danger. That courage means choosing to love anyway, even when you're scared, even when the world tells you it's wrong. I squeezed his hands, feeling the familiar texture of his scars and tattoos. You've made me braver than I ever knew I could be. You've taught me to see beneath surfaces, to understand that people are more complex than we imagine. And you've loved me with an intensity that most people never experience. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes. I promise to be your light when the darkness gets too heavy. I promise to love you with the same fierce devotion you've shown me. And I promise to never let fear keep me from choosing you every single day for the rest of my life. When we kissed as husband and wife, the sun touched the horizon, and our small group of guests erupted in applause. The lake waves crashed behind us, and the wind carried the salt smell of water and the sweet scent of the wildflowers that grew in the dunes. We held each other as the sun sank completely, as the sky turned from brilliant color to soft twilight. His forehead rested against mine, and I felt his heart beating in rhythm with my own. We did it, he whispered. You're mine now. Forever. I always was, I replied. From that first moment. I just didn't know it yet. As darkness fell and stars began to appear, we walked along the beach with our guests, celebrating the impossible love we had found. Ramirez kept me close, his arm around my waist, and every few minutes he would stop to kiss me, as if he still couldn't quite believe I was real. Mrs. Delacroix approached us as the evening grew late, taking both our hands in her aged ones. You have both transformed, she said, looking between us. He has become softer, gentler, more human. And you, my dear, have become stronger, more confident, more complete. This is what real love does. It doesn't diminish us. It reveals who we were always meant to be. That night, as we lay together in the beach house Ramirez had rented, listening to the waves through the open windows, He held me close and spoke softly. Whatever comes, we face it together. Together, I agreed, kissing the phoenix tattoo on his chest, the symbol of rising from ashes, of transformation and rebirth. Always together. Looking back now at the journey that brought us here, I understand that our story was never really about a mafia boss and an art student. It was about two people who found each other across an impossible divide and chose, despite every obstacle and fear, to love each other completely. Every morning, I still wake to find Ramirez watching me. He props himself up on one elbow, his tattooed arm muscles relaxed, his dark eyes soft with wonder. Sometimes I catch him tracing the air above my face, as if he's memorizing me all over again. When I open my eyes and smile at him, he always says the same thing. I still can't believe you're real, that you chose me. And every time, I tell him the truth. I'll choose you every day for the rest of my life. Our story teaches powerful lessons about love that I want to share with you. First, love requires courage. Real, transformative love asks us to be vulnerable, to take risks, to step into uncertainty. When Ramirez walked into that gallery, I was terrified. When he told me about the danger, I was terrified. When I realized I was falling in love with him, I was terrified. But beyond that fear was a connection that changed both our lives. Sometimes the very thing we need most is the thing that scares us the most. Second, people are so much more complex than their circumstances. It would have been easy to see Ramirez only as a dangerous criminal, to judge him by his position rather than his character. But when I looked deeper, I found a man who protected innocence, who secretly helped struggling families, who dreamed of creating beauty instead of violence. We are all more than the boxes the world tries to put us in. When we take time to see the whole person, we often find unexpected depth and beauty. Third, true love sees and accepts all of us, including our darkness. Ramirez didn't just love the easy parts of me. He loved my stubbornness, my idealism, my tendency to see the best in people even when it frustrated him. And I didn't love him despite his darkness. I loved him because I saw the man struggling to find light, the person trying to be better than his circumstances. Real love doesn't require perfection. It accepts us wholly, completely, exactly as we are. Fourth, love has transformative power. Neither of us remained unchanged by our relationship. I learned strength I didn't know I possessed, while he discovered a capacity for tenderness he'd buried for years. When two people truly commit to each other, they create something new. Not by sacrificing who they are, but by becoming better versions of themselves through the mirror of the other's love. Finally, intensity and devotion isn't dangerous when it comes from genuine care. Yes, Ramirez was obsessed with me. He watched me, memorized my schedule, made me the center of his entire world. In different circumstances, that could have been terrifying. But his obsession came from a place of genuine love and protectiveness. It meant being cherished completely, being loved with an intensity most people never experience. His obsession became the greatest gift I ever received, because it meant being chosen, being protected, being loved with everything he had. Standing on that penthouse terrace now, the rain having stopped and the city glittering below us, I understand what Mrs. Delacroix meant when she said love requires courage. I was scared. I was terrified of Ramirez, of his world, of the intensity of what I felt for him. But that fear led me to the greatest love of my life. So I want to leave you with this encouragement. Don't let fear prevent you from accepting love when it comes, even if it arrives in unexpected forms. Don't judge people solely by their exterior or their circumstances. Look deeper. See the heart beneath the surface. And when you find someone who loves you with life-changing intensity, someone who sees all of you and chooses you anyway, hold on to them with everything you have. Because love like that, the kind that transforms and redeems and sees us completely, is rare and precious and worth every moment of fear it took to accept it. Thank you so much for watching our story. We would love to know where you are watching from right now, so please drop a comment and let us know. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel because tomorrow we are dropping another powerful story that you absolutely will not want to miss. Your support means everything to us and helps us continue bringing you these incredible love stories. We are so grateful for each and every one of you. Until tomorrow, remember that the greatest loves often come when we are brave enough to accept them, even when they scare us. Keep choosing love. Keep choosing courage. We will see you in the next story.